Hi, welcome to Polyphonic Press. I'm Jeremy Boyd.
I'm John Van Dyke.
And today we're going to be talking about how high-res audio is going to be the future of music. Here we go. Alright, so we've talked about the Pono player before, but now that we're actually here and it's actually being released, it's actually available to the public who didn't participate in their Kickstarter campaign. It's actually going to be available in electronic stores, I believe next month, and you can pre-order it for $400, which actually, to me, isn't that bad for a brand new product. You know, if you think about how expensive DVD players, when they first came out.
For a brand new technology, yeah, it's true.
That's really not that bad. So the reason if history is any indication, right now, I think we've said this many times before, is we're in a transition period now as far as the music industry is concerned.
We've said it many times.
in several different aspects of the music industry as well, is how people get their music, terms of what's popular, in terms of
what musicians are allowed to do when creating music.
Yeah. So
yeah,
the reason that we think possibly that high-res audio could be the future of music is because recently, I think just today maybe, Paul McCartney is on board with Neil Young's Pono device, that he is overseeing the transition of the entire Beatles catalog to be available in the Pono music store.
You know, Paul McCartney, that hella old guy.
Yeah. So the reason that this is a huge step forward for high-res audio is because in the 1980s, when CDs were first introduced, they really didn't take off until about 1987. And the reason that 87 is significant is because that's when the entire Beatles catalog was first available on CD, and then it skyrocketed. And the same thing happened in 2009, 2010, when the entire Beatles catalog was available for the first time on iTunes, and iTunes shot up 70% and became the biggest music retailer in the world. So
obviously, despite the fact that some people have no idea who he is, the Beatles are still very relevant.
Yes, and they pretty much dictate what's going to be. I
don't know if they dictate it, but they certainly have a lot to do.
They set the trend.
They've always set trends.
So. And if you know anything about Paul McCartney, you know that he's a music fan, and you know that he wants people to hear. He probably understands that high-res audio is good.
Yeah.
Because he's in the music business. He's a music fan. He knows what sounds good, and you know, we've talked about maybe this future of music is the streaming services like Spotify and Rdio and these things, and the Beatles' music isn't available on those services, and
which may account for why some people don't know who they are.
Yeah, that's a whole other thing. But
I don't know anybody who doesn't know who they are.
Yeah, but I think that maybe. I don't know if it's older people who are Beatle fans. I think the Beatles are pretty universal, so I think they pretty much transcend generations. So I think people are gonna get that music. You know, if it's available on Spotify, they're gonna get it that way. If it becomes available in high-res audio, obviously, we would love that to be the number one way that music is available, because one, we would finally have the quality of music that we had even before I was born in the 70s, because as we talked about before, the reason that CDs sounded better in the 80s than vinyl is because of 80s vinyl is shit. It's
there's a definite noticeable reduction in quality. For one thing, they're thinner, they're certainly floppier.
Yeah.
And yeah, you just the feeling of the vinyl itself, you can just tell it's an inferior plastic.
Because there's just reducing cost?
I guess they said I'm all for recycling, but apparently the recycled vinyl, at least the way they did it,
just didn't work.
Maybe it was just an early form of recycling where it just wasn't as pure. So maybe if they really reduced it down to just as fine as the fresh stuff, then they could probably go on and do that. And I hope they do. Yeah. Because
so the reason that CDs sounded better in the 80s is because by comparison they did. But if you know the way that CDs work, that taking samples and digital music, it's very limiting. And if you compare it to vinyl, even records now that are pressed on 180 gram vinyl, if you compare the same album side by side, and I've done it, there's no question the vinyl sounds better. I know that people say that and people are skeptical by that, but doing a side by side comparison, at least to me, the vinyl does sound better. Yeah, it has a wider frequency spectrum. And the other thing too that people don't really realize about vinyl, I know I'm going off on a tangent, but the only way that vinyl can sound better than CD is if it's recorded analog. Mm-hmm. A digital recording translated to vinyl, the CD version is going to sound the same as the vinyl. You're just buying the vinyl for novelty, really. Which, it's not necessarily a bad thing, but I think the appeal of the Pono player and Sony's new device is its convenience. The reason that people flock to the iPod and iTunes is because you could fit it in your pocket. And they didn't... maybe the average person couldn't really hear the difference between CDs and MP3s. Or at least, if they did, they didn't know what... They don't understand. They knew there was a difference, but they didn't know what the difference was.
They don't know what to listen.
Yeah. So, I think... convenience is a huge factor. I mean, as great as vinyl is, it's really not portable. So convenience is a huge factor, I think. And I think I'm gonna wait to see if Sony or if Neil Young's thing is going to be the one. But given that Paul McCartney is giving the green light for the whole Beatles catalog to be available through the Pono store, it could very well be Pono is the future of music. But for now, I'm going to hold off until I see what it's actually going to be. It's like the Blu-ray versus HD DVD right now. Well,
it has to, and in order for it to be truly successful, it has to be comparable in price to, what is available out there. And this is going to be one of the trickier parts that it has to compete with, is that it has to be competitive with free, because there's so much free stuff out there. Yeah. And if that, I don't know how they're going to do it, but somebody's got to figure out a way to do that. So
but anyway, let us know in the comments what you guys think. Do you think this is the future of music? Do you think Paul McCartney making the Beatles catalog available through Pono is the tipping point? Or do you think it's just going to continue the way of the streaming services? Be sure to subscribe so when we post new videos. You can check us out on Twitter and Facebook. Follow John on Twitter at Funky Dutch. And you can help us out on Patreon. You really some cool perks there, so definitely check that out. And that's about it. I'm Jeremy Boyd.
I'm John Van Dyke.
Take it easy.